Hey guys, welcome to episode 9 of Women's Wrestling Focus, brought to you by SEScoops and hosted by me, Ella J of a Wrestling Gal podcast. Now, we are officially in the month of July, which means that we are officially through the first half of 2021. And this past half year in wrestling has had so many ups and downs, especially in women's wrestling. So on today's episode, we're going to be doing a little recap and review and dissecting everything women's wrestling in the first half of the year of 2021. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. So firstly, I think it is worth noting that we had just come off of the wild year that was 2020 in the middle of a global pandemic. So a lot of my expectations going into 2021 were definitely lowered, although I did have lots of hopes as now we are finally getting a taste of more freedom and everything is starting to slowly be lifted back up. But just coming off of 2020, I know a lot of people were really weary about what moves are these companies going to be making next, as obviously there was little to no crowds, there was sporadic independent shows, so really the only thing that we had consistently was WWE, AEW, and Impact tapings, at least in the US wise anyway. And plus, travel restrictions were a real thing, so you couldn't have a lot of the international stars maybe that companies wanted to bring in. So heading into 2021, I know I had a lot of hopes, but also at the end of the day, I didn't have a lot of expectations because still we were in the middle of a global crisis. And so I know a lot of people felt the same way too, but I did have some hopes. And starting off 2021, we had the incredible WWE Women's Royal Rumble. And there were some amazing returns in there. There was also some new faces in there. And overall, the Royal Rumble was absolutely incredible for the women. You had the return of people like Victoria, Jillian Hall, Alicia Fox, Mickie James, Tori Wilson. And oh my gosh, it just would have been better with the crowd, but the Thunderdome reaction and social media reactions for those returns was insane. I will never forget how I was feeling when Victoria emerged after 12 years being away from WWE. And then obviously that showcase had Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, and Charlotte Flair as the final three. Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair eliminated the Queen, Charlotte Flair, and that moment of them sitting on the ring, kind of like the newer talent eliminating the veteran in the locker room, the Queen, Charlotte Flair, to have them be the final two was an incredible shot. I am still envisioning it in my mind. And then obviously Bianca Belair went on to win all the way from number 3, outlasting everybody else to win the 2021 Women's Royal Rumble. And what an emotional moment. I am glad that those two had the final 2 spotlight. It allowed them to grow themselves as stars and kind of showcase themselves on a grander platform, as obviously they did amazing work in NXT and all of that. But to see them now more on the main roster and showcased in a big event like the Royal Rumble, that was absolutely incredible. And obviously Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley both went on to become champions on Raw and SmackDown as the women's champions. So that was kind of a little bit of foreshadowing that maybe we didn't know at the time, as now Bianca Belair is the current SmackDown women's champion and Rhea Ripley is now the Raw women's champion. So they started off the year hot. So definitely a plus for the Women's Royal Rumble this year. We started off the year in January hot. The Women's Royal Rumble, incredible as always. And so I was super happy with that performance. And then shortly after the Women's Royal Rumble on the Impact sides of things, we saw some former talents going into the Knockouts division like ODB, and we also had Jazz in the mix there for a while too, as Deonna Purrazzo was continuing her hot streak of winning and her iconic championship reign. So the Knockouts division during that time too was absolutely flourishing. Obviously you had matchups like ODB versus Deonna Purrazzo, you had Jazz and Jordan Grace Grace in the mix. You had Fire and Flava. Obviously, you had Tennille Dashwood. You had Nevaeh and Havoc. You had Alicia. You had so many people involved, and also Susie and Kimberly. How could I forget? The Knockouts division, especially during that time, was super cool. They were kind of doing a callback, bringing back some of the veteran and legends in professional wrestling into the Knockouts division, and it gave us a good little run and kind of rejuvenated the Knockouts division, because at that point, Deonna had really steamrolled through everybody standing in front of her. And now to bring back some of the legends, people who she hasn't necessarily locked up with, was super refreshing and rejuvenating. And you were also building on the Knockouts Tag Team Championships at the time. Obviously, Jordynne Grace and Jazz formed a tag team at that point. So Fire and Flava had some competition alongside Nevaeh and Havoc. And so that was really a good time to be alive in the Knockouts division. And now, obviously, here we are now. Deonna Purrazzo in present day has been in Impact now for over a year, over 300 days as champion, really going the whole year being a champion, excluding like maybe a few weeks in there. Deonna has really stepped up throughout the last year in the Impact Knockouts division to really be the champion. And like she said, she has gone through everybody in the division. And so going forward with Slammiversary, it's making me wonder who is going to be her official opponent. Will they be pulling from other companies, other places? Will it be somebody outside of Impact going after the Knockouts Championship coming up soon at Slammiversary? We will see, but the Knockouts division has definitely been consistent this entire year. Obviously, we've seen some people come and go, but we've also seen some new faces like Taylor Wilde returning after over a decade away from professional wrestling. You also have Rachel Ellering debuting in Impact. You had Jazz coming in, and so it's super exciting to see that Impact is navigating. They had some losses, obviously, losing people like Nevaeh and other people as well. Now, Jazz is gone too, although we saw her a little bit. But it's cool to see Impact bringing in new people and rebuilding their roster after it had some blows. So Impact is definitely flourishing. The Knockouts division has been so consistent and has great storytelling, great talent, and they know how to capitalize and utilize their women and in every aspect. And as they continue to grow the tag team division, I know the Knockouts Championship is definitely in good hands. That title picture is always so successful, but it's cool that they're also working on building their tag team scene as well and building more formidable tag teams, as now obviously you have Rachel Ellering and Jordynne Grace. Now you have Havoc and Rosemary as a team too, as an alliance. That is a very interesting team. And then obviously you have the champions Fire and Flava, and Deonna has steamrolled this division. So it's going to be interesting to see what is next for her. But Impact as a whole, the Knockouts division has been so standard, so high quality. They are consistently putting on great performances, showing up and showing out, as they say. So I am interested to see what the second half of this year has for them and who will step up to Deonna Purrazzo. Will she be dethroned? We'll see. She's definitely been so dominant and has absolutely ruled the Impact zone. So Impact, keep doing what you're doing, because they're doing amazing things. And also, right after the Royal Rumble on WWE's turf, we also saw the first ever Women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, which was an incredible tournament in and of itself in NXT. We also got to see some new faces and new signees in this tournament. So Gigi Dolan, formerly known as Priscilla Kelly, Cora Jade, formerly known as Elena Black, and Zoe Stark, formerly known as Lacey Ryan. And it's ironic that Zoe/Lacey was in this tournament, because now she is one half of the NXT Women's Tag Team Champions alongside Io Shirai. But I digress. WWE definitely has brought in a lot of new talents to NXT, especially this year, but coming in, that was really the first class of those three being showcased on NXT television. And obviously, throughout this tournament, you had 8 teams, but in the finals, it was Ember Moon and Shotzi Blackheart against Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez. And now, initially, the winners of this Tag Team Classic were going to be vying for the main roster WWE Women's Tag Team Championships, and Dakota Kai and Raquel did that. They faced Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax on an episode of NXT, obviously falling short to a I guess you could call it, questionable ending. And so obviously they fell short in a very questionable decision, which I won't get into. But obviously then the next week or two after they had lost, NXT just introduced the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships. And so now you have 2 Women's Tag Team Championships on the main roster and NXT. And so once those NXT Tag Team Championships were introduced, the rightful winners of the Dusty Rhodes Women's Classic was Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez being awarded the new NXT Women's Tag Team Championships. However, not even an hour later, these championships were defended and lost. And I can understand them wanting to defend their championships and them being the inaugural championships. Like, we want some action. Okay, fine. And so an hour later on that episode of NXT, we saw Dakota and Raquel defend their championships against the finalists in the original tournament, Shotzi Blackheart and Ember Moon. And obviously, Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez fell short, unfortunately, again. And so now we already had a new champions at the end of the night in NXT for the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships. And so that period of time was really, really weird. A lot of people, including myself, didn't really understand why the winners just weren't awarded the NXT Women's Tag Team Championships in the first place. Why go for the main roster ones if they were going to lose, and then a week or two later they introduced the other championships? So it was a weird time. However, the women definitely capitalized on this opportunity, and they took the best of it as they could. And now obviously this led to NXT further establishing their tag teams. Obviously you have The Way, you have Aaliyah and Jessie Kamea, you obviously have now the new champions Io Shirai and Zoe Stark, you have Ember and Shotzi, you have Dakota and Raquel, and WWE and NXT just keep building on their women's tag teams in NXT, which is amazing because of that you have multiple segments for the women. Obviously The Way has their own stuff with Johnny Gargano sometimes, and Indy Hartwell and Dexter Lumis. That has been amazing. You obviously have the NXT Women's Championship picture with Raquel. We've seen Mercedes in there, Tony in there, and Dakota Kai. The NXT Women's Championship picture is ever evolving and is always constant. And so you have multiple storylines going on for the NXT women. And so definitely through that tag team classic, that really further cemented that NXT at least is definitely highly focusing and valuing their NXT women's tag teams. And so NXT has been doing a tremendous job with that, although the title reigns have been short, but they're being showcased. And so I guess we'll take what we can get, right? And now hitting the month of March at this time chronologically, let's talk about AEW for a bit here. Obviously, Hikaru Shida had been the AEW Women's World Champion all throughout the pandemic, as we didn't get to see her a lot, though, because of travel restrictions and all of that. And so people like Britt Baker, Red Velvet, Kylan King, Jade Cargill, and everybody really had to step up while their champion was away. And you definitely saw Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa stepping up, and that led to the first ever women's main event in AEW history, which was the iconic Lights Out match. And obviously that match saw Britt Baker get busted open, and Thunder Rosa ultimately took the victory, but that match was so huge for AEW as they had faced so many criticisms for their AEW women's division, as they have so many talented people on the roster, but you really didn't see any consistent storylines outside of the AEW Women's Championship picture. Obviously, you had Penelope Ford doing her stuff with Best Friends and Miro and all of that, but you never really saw a consistent women's storyline on there. Obviously, you had Tay Conti and Anna Jay as a part of the Dark Order, but again, you never really saw consistency in the AEW women's division. I think really outside of, again, the AEW Women's World Championship picture. You obviously have some title matches, and then obviously they had that whole tournament and bracket, the USA side and the Japan side. That was phenomenal too. But again, it was mainly surrounding the title picture. And so with this, you take two competitors who are not even vying for a championship. It's just two of the women at the top of their game in wrestling today, Britt Baker, DMD, and Thunder Rosa, who has really become this icon in NWA, even owning her own promotion, Mission Pro, an all-women's promotion. And you have them going at it in an incredible main event, which definitely in the contendership for match of the year, in my opinion anyway. And so you have them two going at it. Thunder Rosa comes out on top, but Britt Baker becomes an icon throughout this match for bleeding, and that image of her, just the blood is seeping through and she's staring at the camera. It was so badass. And so that match really, really breathed a lot of life into the AEW women's division. And now Britt Baker is the AEW Women's World Champion after defeating Hikaru Shida at Double or Nothing back at the end of May. And now we are in the era of the DMD Britt Baker. So everything is really paying off for Britt here. Obviously, now she was in the first ever women's main event on AEW. She lost, but she still came out on top, especially with the respect level. Thunder Rosa is killing it as always in AEW and NWA and Mission Pro and everything she's doing. Obviously, it was great to see Hikaru Shida back in AEW, but the era of Hikaru Shida is over. I am so grateful for it. She carried the AEW women's division alongside Britt, especially in a time that was dark for so many people throughout the pandemic. But going forward, we are now in the era of the DMD, and right now she is feuding with a former AEW Women's World Champion, Nyla Rose. And so it's kind of cool to see Nyla and Vicky teaming up against Britt and Rebel/Reba. It's kind of cool, I'm not going to lie. So I look forward to this era of the DMD. AEW is ever evolving as now you have new talents signed like Jade Cargill, Red Velvet. You see Kylan King a lot, Penelope Ford. Tay Conti is killing it as always. And I really want Anna Jay back, but then maybe that's just me personally. Ella Jay, Anna Jay, but wishing Anna Jay nothing but the best of luck as she recovers from her injury, and I look forward to when she returns. And now heading into WrestleMania season, Bianca Belair versus Sasha Banks was so hyped up going into WrestleMania, and the fact that they got to main event night one of WrestleMania for the SmackDown Women's Championship was absolutely incredible and breathtaking to watch live, because again, you have this mind of Sasha Banks, this incredible heel work she does going against this new star, Bianca Belair, who has so many amazing moves in her arsenal, and you got to see her strength on display in this matchup. So those two meshing together worked so beautifully. But not only was their in-ring work special, but the message behind this match like transcended life and really inspired and brought hope to a lot of people, especially young girls, as Bianca and Sasha really showcased that women can thrive. Women can main event WrestleMania. And again, yes, technically this was the second ever women's main event of WrestleMania, but this matchup specifically was so incredible and empowered so many people, and again, possibly contender for match of the year. It was so incredible, and the moment at the end where Bianca Belair defeated Sasha Banks to become the new SmackDown Women's Champion, and you see her being all emotional, it really catches you in the feels. And again, the story to this was absolutely incredible. The emotion behind it was so on par, and it was really just a feel-good moment. And now Bianca had reached the top after climbing the ladder in the Mae Young Classic, then NXT, then going to SmackDown, and now she's the SmackDown Women's Champion, and she's been killing it ever since, going against Bayley multiple times and showcasing her all the time. Bianca is so special, so athletic. She is so intense in a good way. I can't explain it. She just has a great energy about her, and she's incredible in the ring too as well. And she's so charismatic and motivational. And it was super cool to see her capture a championship for the first time. And obviously, Sasha Banks building herself up throughout the last year with Bayley and then winning the SmackDown Women's Championship back in October was incredible too. And leading up to WrestleMania, there was a great story there going along for them. And also at WrestleMania, we obviously, again, going back to the whole Royal Rumble moment, the final two, Rhea Ripley made it to the final two. Rhea Ripley got called up to the main roster about 2 weeks before WrestleMania as Asuka needed an opponent. And going in, Rhea was kind of the underdog as Asuka had really ruled the Raw women's division the last year after Becky Lynch left and all throughout the pandemic era. So Asuka was looking for an opponent, and Rhea Ripley answered the call. And so Rhea Ripley went into that matchup and came out victorious and was the new Raw Women's Champion on night 2 of WrestleMania. So it's really cool to see some new faces becoming champion. And so those victories for Rhea and Bianca at WrestleMania were absolutely incredible. And obviously also you had Nia and Tamina winning the #1 contendership for the Women's Tag Team Championships, but ultimately fell short on night 2 to Nia and Tamina. But WrestleMania overall was absolutely incredible. But however, there was some devastating news a few days later the following week as again, WWE did their spring cleaning and we saw the loss of several women superstars, including Mickie James, Billie Kay, Chelsea Green, and Peyton Royce. And it was just absolutely devastating at the time. Definitely, it was such a blow, I think, and a shock to a lot of people. But again, now we have really reached the 4th or 5th wave of these releases. Obviously now we've seen a lot of NXT talent released, and we have just even seen some main roster talent released like Ruby Riott and Lana, and so it's just kind of become this constant theme over the last few months as again WWE NXT are bringing in a lot of talent, but they're also releasing a lot of talent at the same time. So it's really a give and pull. It's really a tough situation, but at the end of the day, all of the talent released throughout these last few months are really going to flourish going forward. I think they have built such a name for themselves inside WWE and outside too. But going forward, they are really going to be such hot commodities. And already going forward from the first wave, you were already seeing them do amazing things. Like Mickie James is now executive producer of an all-women's pay-per-view for NWA, and she's going to be wrestling on NWA 73. We've seen Mickie and Chelsea teased for Slammiversary. Chelsea is already filling up her bookings, and she has her own podcast now called Green with Envy. Billy and Peyton, or Cassie and Jesse, now have their own podcast as well called Off Her Chops, and Ruby Riott has changed her name. Brandi Lauren is starting to do appearances. Lana had just appeared on Talk is Jericho, and so a lot of the talent released, although definitely was a blow to WWE, but wherever they go, I really believe that they are going to thrive, and now they're in a situation where they're going to be such hot commodities and they're going to be successful wherever they go. And again, the one place is not at the end all be all anymore. You have so many other amazing companies like AEW, Ring of Honor, Impact, you have Japan, you have the independents as well you could always fall back on. And so again, the opportunities are really limitless. I know a lot of people are paying attention and wondering what moves the superstars are going to be making next. And I definitely want to know. We've seen some of them, but again, through the most recent releases, their 90-day non-compete clauses are a little bit further out, so we have to wait a little bit. But that first round, however, is coming up very, very soon as next week, where they have a little bit more freedom to kind of navigate and feel out where they want to go. So I have a feeling we're going to be seeing some news about some of the first wave of releases coming out very, very soon. And again, it's really been an up and down roller coaster year, but the releases definitely at first were a big shock. Not to happen once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 or 5 times is been so strange. And it's been a roller coaster of a year for women's wrestling. We have had some great moments, but there's also been times where the booking has fallen short. And again, it's nothing to do with the women. It's with creative and the backstage team writing everything up for them. They're just going out there and doing what they're told. So it's really been, we've had obviously some great moments and great matches, but there's also been some dull time and dull moments where it's just the same thing over and over again. Or sometimes I'm like, what are they doing, you know? But I think every wrestling fan can relate to that. So let me know down below, though, what is your favorite moment from the first half of the year in women's wrestling in the year of 2021? What has been your favorite moment or match, or maybe which superstar do you think has really risen above the occasion? Obviously, Io Shirai held down NXT for a while, and she unfortunately lost her NXT Women's Championship at NXT TakeOver Stand and Deliver to Raquel, but Io was champion for over 300 days, and I can't believe that I didn't mention Kaylee Ray. Kaylee Ray had an incredible reign of over 600 days. And now Kaylee Ray has the second longest reign of all time in WWE history amongst the women, and first of all time overall in the modern era. That is something absolutely insane. And obviously now NXT UK is ushering us into this era now of Meiko Satomura, but I wouldn't count out Kaylee just yet. She really hasn't gotten a rematch since, but we've seen so many incredible talents also popping up in NXT UK. You have Amelia McKenzie. You have the veterans in the division, Isla Dawn and Ginny. You have now Mila Schmidt. You have Valkyrie. You have Danny Luna. You have Stevie Turner. Now you have Blair Davenport. And I've heard there's also been some new tryouts. And so I think it's going to be super cool going forward to see where NXT UK goes from here. But you need to give Kaylee her props because she really held down the division for the last 2 years. Over 600 days as champion is absolutely insane. And again, it's really not heard of much anymore, at least in the modern era, which makes her the longest reigning women's champion in the modern era, second all time behind Moolah. Absolutely incredible. And so now Meiko Satomura has taken the reign over as the NXT UK Women's Champion, and I think they're going to absolutely blow the house down over there in the UK for NXT. They are doing incredible things, but again, we've had so many up and down moments, but that was another great moment. Now, looking forward to the second half of the year. Like I said previously, you obviously have Mickie James leading the charge for NWA's all-women's pay-per-view coming up at the end of August called Empower, which they are slowly but surely building to, which I covered in the last episode of Women's Wrestling Focus. So if you haven't already, I highly suggest going to check out episode 8, where I do a deep dive into the potential card and everything NWA Empower. And so that in and of itself is going to be incredible. Obviously, also, we have SummerSlam coming up in Las Vegas, but also Ring of Honor also has their official Ring of Honor Women's Championship tournament as they are looking to crown a new inaugural champion. And at the time of recording this, there's been a lot of competitors announced. We have Alex Gracia, we have Allison Kay, Roxy, Maserati, Trish Adora, Miranda Alizé, Willow Nightingale, Angelina Love has a first round bye, and so many more, and still a few to be announced. And so Ring of Honor is definitely taking the world by storm right now and putting people on notice, especially for women's wrestling. It's going to be interesting to see how this women's championship tournament will go down. There is so many amazing stars in this tournament already, and we don't even know the whole card. And Quinn McKay is also vying for a slot in this tournament in a couple weeks against Mandy Leon, who has already solidified her spot in this tournament. So Ring of Honor is definitely one to be watching this summer coming up in the second half of the year, who is going to be crowned the inaugural Ring of Honor Women's World Champion. We'll see. Also looking forward to the second half of the year. A lot more independent promotions now are coming and bringing shows back, and you now have live crowds again. I know Australia has been running some shows for PWA and all of them, UK finally, once lockdown is pretty much over, coming up very soon. I'm sure crowds are going to be back and shows are really going to be consistently up and running again. And also here in North America, you have so many all-women's promotions and shows now really coming into fruition. Like Mission Pro is constantly delivering great shows. You have Flawless, you have NWA coming up, obviously. And so it's really a fun time to be back in professional wrestling, and independent wrestling is really back now with crowds, and it's so cool to see wrestlers get back to doing what they love consistently. And now, as long as everybody stays safe, as again, that should always be the first priority, professional wrestling is really back in the second half of the year. It's been a long time coming. It's been like almost a year and a half now, but we have finally reached the light at the end of the tunnel, and I am so looking forward to the second half of this year to see even more professional wrestling, obviously outside of everything televised, but now you have GCW gearing up, you have Mission Pro, you have so many promotions gearing up now and coming back and putting on spectacular events. And I look forward to going back to wrestling shows. It's going to be such a fun time. It's been so long. I've missed it so much, and I bet everybody else has too. And so it's going to be cool to see everybody really going back to maybe their first professional wrestling show in over a year. I know that's the case for myself, but looking back on the first half of this year again, I want to know, who do you guys and gals and everybody think really has been the shining star in women's wrestling in the first half of the year? Was it Britt Baker? Bianca Belair did a lot. Io Shirai has absolutely flourished. She is back now in NXT. There's also a lot of contenders to be named Woman of the Year in professional wrestling. And so I want to know your opinions. Let us know in the comments down below who has really stood out to you in women's professional wrestling, or what match or what moment has really stood out to you in this first half of the year, whether it's positive or negative, because like I said, it's been a roller coaster of the first half of 2021, and that's the same thing with life. But wrapping things up here, in conclusion, the first half of 2021 it's been insanely great, but we've also had a lot of low moments as well. But again, that's just life at the end of the day, and professional wrestling. Not everything can be great all the time, but when it's great, it really is so spectacular. And I am so grateful to have had professional wrestling still continue throughout this whole pandemic. And now that we're nearing the end, the official light at the end of the tunnel, the second half of the year I think is going to really rule, and I look forward to it being back at shows, seeing so many incredible things coming up. We have the Ring of Honor Women's Tournament, we have NWA, we have Pro Wrestling Eve next month too as well. Wrestle Queen of 4 is coming out. There's so many amazing shows, and we're just getting started. There's still the fall and winter, and there's still the latter half of summer, and so I think it's going to be a great time for women's professional wrestling. And as a wise woman once said, women's wrestling matters. This is Ella J as host of Women's Wrestling Focus. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe down below to let us know your thoughts, and so you can be notified when a new episode or any episode of SEScoops YouTube channel comes out. So again, this is Ella J. Thank you for joining me on the 9th edition of Women's Wrestling Focus, and I hope everybody stays safe and healthy as we kind of gear up for the second half of the year. So thanks again for joining me.